Good afternoon, all of you. So now we are going to discuss post-fertilization events. So what are post-fertilization events? So the events which occurs after fusion of male and female gametes or after formation of zygote called post-fertilization events. So simply definition for post-fertilization events, the events which occurs after fertilization. So what is fertilization actually? So fusion of male and female gametes resulting in the formation of diploid zygote called fertilization. Diploid zygote called fertilization. Okay, right? See what type of fertilizations we discussed so far: internal fertilization and external fertilization. Right? If fertilization or fusion of male and female gametes occurs inside the organism, inside the female organism called internal fertilization. If fusion of male and female gametes occurs outside the body of an organism called external fertilization. Right? So what is internal fertilization? What is external fertilization? So what is actual definition for fertilization? So this information already we discussed in previous classes, right? So now we are going to discuss post-fertilization events. So third important event, post-fertilization. Post-fertilization events. So definition for this, the events which occurs after fertilization called post-fertilization events. Is it clear? So the events which occurs after fertilization. After fertilization. So the events which occurs after fertilization called post-fertilization events, and that too after formation of zygote only many events occurs. So we call them as post-fertilization events. Okay, so what is zygote actually? See that fusion of male and female gametes resulting in the formation of diploid cell in all sexually reproducing organisms. So we call it as zygote, right? So what it is? In all sexually reproducing organisms, sexually reproducing organisms, so fusion of gametes resulting in the formation of zygote, right? And that too, all sexually reproducing organisms starts their life. All sexually reproducing organisms starts their life with a single cell, that is zygote, right? All sexually reproducing organisms starts their life with a single cell, that is zygote. Even though our life also starts with a single cell in mother womb, that is zygote. And larger tree, Ficus bengalensis, also starts their life with a single cell, right? So that cell is considered as zygote. So there is a vital link or connecting link. Vital link or connecting link from one generation to another generation. From one generation to, so it is a connecting link in between one generation to another generation. Another generation. Right. And gradually this diploid zygote develops into embryo. Right. So this diploid zygote, what is the condition? What is the ploidy? So diploid. So that diploid zygote develops into embryo. After fertilization, the diploid zygote develops into embryo. Right? So during conversion of zygote into embryo, so that zygote undergoes cell division and cell differentiation. So cell division, it is nothing but mitosis division and cell differentiation. Cell differentiation. So what is the difference between cell differentiation and cell division? So cell division is nothing but mitotic division only, right? So the diploid zygote undergoes so many mitotic divisions and gradually it develops into embryonic tissue. So that embryonic tissue differentiates and forms various types of permanent tissues. So it means that tissues forms tissue system, tissue system forms organ, organs forms organ system, and finally organ system forms organism, right? So in the process of evolving, otherwise in the process of development, embryonic development, see first that zygote develops into embryo. Am I right? It means embryonic tissue. Embryonic tissue. So that embryonic tissue develops into, otherwise it undergoes differentiation and forms permanent tissues. So that permanent tissues forms tissue system. Am I right? Tissue system. Then the tissue system forms organs. Then organs forms organ system. And finally that organ system forms organism, right? So you can take any organism, sexually reproducing organisms. So that sexually reproducing organism starts their life with a single cell, that is zygote. So that zygote undergoes so many mitotic divisions and gradually it develops into embryonic tissue. So that embryonic tissue develops into or differentiated into permanent tissues. That permanent tissues forms tissue systems. So the tissue systems forms organs. Organs again forms organ system. Organ system forms organism, either it is plant or animal. So all sexually reproducing organisms formed in this manner only after fertilization. Okay, right? But what about diploid organisms? What about haploid organisms? See, in haploid organisms, male and female gametes formed by the mitosis division only, right? So after that, male and female gametes fuses with each other and it resulting in the formation of zygote. See that zygote, the diploid zygote undergoes mitosis divisions or meiosis divisions in haploid organisms. In haploid organisms, that zygote is diploid. Right? All sexually reproducing organisms, zygotes are always diploid. Okay, right? In haploid organisms, after fertilization, the zygote undergoes reduction division or meiosis division. And forms haploid zygospores. And that haploid zygospores gradually develops into new individuals. But one more thing here, in haploid organisms, after fertilization, the zygote enclosed by they are surrounded by the one of the thick layer. So it provides protection to the zygote from the desiccation. Desiccation means water loss and extreme conditions also. They provides protection to the zygote from the desiccation and extreme conditions. And after a period of rest, that zygote undergoes reduction division or meiosis division and forms haploid zygospores. Those haploid zygospores later develops into haploid organisms in haploid organisms. Okay, right? But what about diploid organisms? See, in diploid organisms, that zygote undergoes mitosis division, not meiosis division. Right? Is it clear? So just two things here. In haploid organisms, that zygote undergoes meiosis division. In diploid organisms, that zygote undergoes mitosis division. Just two things. Correct? So note it down now. What about zygotes? In all sexually reproducing organisms, due to fusion of gametes, it resulting in the formation of zygotes, and that to all sexual reproducing organisms starts their life with a single cell, that is zygote. It is a connecting link in between one generation to another generation. So it is a connecting link or vital link, right, from one generation to another generation, right? So it is also responsible for continuity of species. That zygote also helps in continuity of species, right? And this diploid zygote gradually develops into embryo, right? So before develops into embryo, the zygote undergoes cell division and cell differentiation. So what is cell division? Nothing but mitosis division in diploid organisms. In haploid organisms, mitosis division. In diploid organisms, meiosis division. So after division, in diploid organisms, that cells undergo cell differentiation and gradually they differentiates into various tissues. The tissues forms tissue systems. They forms organ system, finally organism, right? So in this way, embryogenesis or new individuals are formed after fertilization. Okay, right. Then now come to embryogenesis. Okay, so what is embryogenesis? So this gradually that a zygote develops into embryo. The process of development of embryo from the zygote called embryogenesis. So definition for embryogenesis. So next event after fertilization, embryogenesis. Embryogenesis. So what is embryogenesis? So definition for embryogenesis. See, don't forget, in haploid organisms, the zygote undergoes mitosis division. In diploid organisms, the zygote undergoes meiosis. In haploid organism, zygote undergoes meiosis division. Note down these two statements. In haploid organisms, zygote undergoes meiosis divisions and forms haploid zygospores. Then, in diploid organisms, zygote undergoes mitosis divisions and gradually it develops into embryonic tissue. Okay, right. Then come to embryogenesis. What is embryogenesis? It is a process of development of embryo from the zygote, right? It is a process of development. It is a process of development of embryo. Development of embryo from the zygote. From the zygote. From the zygote called embryogenesis. Embryogenesis. Okay, right. Done. So based on the development of embryo, or based on the embryogenesis, say that organisms can be classified into two types. Animals can be classified into two types, right? So based on embryogenesis, right? It is of two types. Otherwise, animals are of two types. What are they? So one is oviparous animals. Second one is viviparous animals. So first one, oviparous animals. Then second one, viviparous animals. So what is the major difference in between oviparous animals and viviparous animals? So first you can take oviparous animals, right? So the animals which directly laying eggs called oviparous animals, right? So small side heading, oviparous animals. So now tell me, what are oviparous animals? So these oviparous animals directly laying eggs. Otherwise simply egg laying animals. egg-laying animals are called as oviparous animals. Egg-laying animals are called as oviparous animals. And one more thing here. So the food material which is required for the embryogenesis or development of embryo already preserved or stored inside the egg. So the food material which is required, the food which is required, the food material which is required to the embryogenesis, to the embryogenesis. So the food material which is required to the embryogenesis already preserved or already stored inside the egg. Inside the egg. Why? Because for the development of embryo, otherwise zygote gradually develops into embryo. So for that embryogenesis, some amount of food material is required. So that food material already preserved inside the egg. Inside the egg. And that too, this embryogenesis takes place inside the egg, but outside the body of an organism, right? So embryogenesis takes place inside the egg, right? Outside the female body, outside the female organism. So inside the egg, but outside the female organism. And one more thing, here that entire food material and embryo enclosed by, they are surrounded by the calcareous shells. Calcareous shells are nothing but calcium carbonate shells, right? So here that food material and embryo develops, otherwise enclosed by the calcareous shells. It is nothing but calcium carbonate shells. So that embryo and that food material enclosed by, they are surrounded by the calcium carbonate shells or calcareous shells. And that those organisms are oviparous animals laying eggs in safe places. Laying eggs in safe places. In safe places. Where exactly? So they're laying eggs in safe places. And is it less protective or more protective? That oviparous animals laying eggs in safe places, but during development process, right, whenever new ones or young ones hatch out or comes out from the egg, they're less protective. Maybe they act as food material to the predators or other organisms, right? So is it more protective or less protective? So that oviparous animals are less protective. Newly formed offsprings are less protective. See, after a period, after attaining maturity, after a certain maturity, young ones or new ones hatch out. Young ones or new ones hatch out. So young ones hatch out means comes out from the egg. After attaining a certain duration, a certain period, so young ones or new ones comes out from the egg. But the offsprings are less protective. Why? Because they act as food material to the other animals. So these are oviparous animals. See, again I'm repeating, what are oviparous animals? Egg-laying animals are called oviparous animals. So here that embryogenesis takes place inside the egg, but outside the body of female organism, right? And it requires some amount of food material. That food material already preserved inside the egg. And that food material and embryo enclosed by, they are surrounded by the one of the calcium carbonate shell. So they're laying eggs in safe places after attaining a certain period of maturity, right? So young ones or new offspring hatch out or comes out from the eggs, but they are less protective. Why? Because they act as food material to the other animals, right? So give me some examples for this. Egg-laying animals. Egg-laying animals. Note down some examples for this. Examples. Examples. Egg-laying animals. Fish, okay. Fishes, frog, birds, reptiles, am I right? Reptiles, birds, fishes, frog, arthropods, some arthropods also. Arthropods, arthropods, then arthropods, then prototherians, some mammals, prototherians. These are examples for oviparous animals, right? So what are oviparous animals here? So fishes, frog, birds, reptiles, arthropods, then prototherians. Prototherians are mammals, egg-laying mammals. So prototherians, arthropods, birds, reptiles, fishes, and frogs, example for oviparous animals. Right. Then, now come to viviparous animals again. What are viviparous animals? So, viviparous animals. So in viviparous animals, embryogenesis takes place inside the body of female organism, right? So here embryogenesis. Embryogenesis. So what is embryogenesis here? Formation of embryo from the zygote called embryogenesis. No. So that embryogenesis takes place inside the body of female organism. Inside the body of organism. Which organism? Female organism. And that too, these organisms directly delivered new ones or young ones. So these organisms directly gives birth to the young ones. They directly gives birth to young ones. Right. Then that too, here that calcium carbonate shells are completely absent and food material directly supplied to the embryo from the mother, right? So here mother only provides food material to the embryo. Mother provides food material to the embryo through placenta. So mother only provides food material to the embryo or developing embryo through placenta. So with the help of placenta only, required food material, right? Required food material supplied to the embryo. But calcium carbonate shells are completely absent here. So after attaining maturity, right? After attaining maturity, so young ones delivered. Young ones delivered from the mother. Right. Then examples for viviparous animals. So give me some examples for viviparous animals. Metatherian and eutherian animals. Metatherian and eutherian mammals. So metatherian and eutherian mammals, examples for viviparous animals, including human beings also, right? Including humans. Human beings also viviparous animals. So now come to viviparous plants. Viviparous plants. So plants are oviparous or viviparous. So in general, directly they give seeds, but in some plants, directly new plantlets comes out from the mother. Viviparous plants. So what are viviparous plants? So, see, in some plants, especially mangrove plants, seeds germinates while they're attaching to the mother plant only. So that condition is called viviparous condition in plants. So write down definition for viviparous plants. So in some plants, otherwise directly you have to write in mangroves. In mangroves. So germinates while they're attaching to the mother plant. While they're attaching to the mother. While they're attaching to mother or parent plant. Mother or parent plant called viviparous plants. Okay, sir, what are mangrove plants? The plants which are growing near the seashore called mangrove plants. So the plants which are growing near the seashore are in saline condition called mangroves. Best example for that is Avicennia and Rhizophora. So in Avicennia and Rhizophora, directly new plantlets developed from the mother. Directly new plantlets developed on the mother plant or on the parent plant. So give me some examples. Avicennia and Rhizophora. So Rhizophora, better to take Rhizophora. So because in surroundings, saline condition is available near the seashore in main plant or mother plant surroundings. So fully saline condition or salty condition in that area, that seeds cannot germinate. That seeds cannot germinate in that saline condition. So that's the reason directly new plantlets germinated, otherwise new plantlets formed on the mother plant only. So after that, it detached from the parent and develops into new individual. The type of plants are called viviparous plants. Example, mangroves, Rhizophora. Right. Then now come to another topic, fruit and seed formation. So how fruit and seed formation takes place in plants? Fruit and seed formation. So fruit and seed formation. Right. So after fertilization, what type of changes we observed in flowering plant or flowers? So calyx fall off, corolla fall off, androecium fall off. Then style and stigma also fall off or wither away. Then ovary turns into fruit. Ovary develops into fruit. Ovules develops into seeds. Right. So now come to what type of changes we observed in flower. So calyx. Outermost whorl is calyx. No. Calyx. Then corolla. Then androecium. Then gynoecium. then style, sorry, not complete gynoecium, just style and stigma. Style and stigma. See, calyx, corolla, androecium, style and stigma wither away or fall off. Wither away or fall off. Am I right? But in some plants, calyx remain persistent. In some plants, calyx remain persistent. Give me some examples. Calyx remain persistent after fertilization also. Persistent after fertilization also. Example for this is chili, capsicum frutescens, chili, brinjal, Solanum melangina, brinjal, right? Tomato, Lycopersicum esculentum, tomato. Examples for persistent calyx. What is persistent calyx? After fertilization, in general, calyx fall off. But here, that calyx remain persistent, remain present after fertilization also. Example, chili. So in chili, over the chili, green color structure is there now, right? That is calyx. Then in brinjal also, calyx remain persistent. So not only this, coconut, monocot plant, Cocos nucifera. So in coconut also, calyx remain persistent, right? So calyx remain persistent in chili and brinjal. So better to take corolla and androecium and stigma persistent in, right? Corolla, then androecium, style and stigma. Style and stigma persistent in which plant? Yes. Which plant? Which plant it is? Think once. So corolla, androecium, then style and stigma persistent in which plant? In general, Phalaphnosa. Yes, in general, complete these structures, Phalaph. Punica granatum, scientific name for that. Punica granatum. Punica granatum. Complete name. Punica granatum. Pomegranate, simply. Common name for this, pomegranate. Complete scientific name, Punica granatum or pomegranate. So observe that pomegranate fruit. So at the base, many stamens, style and stigma also persistent, right? So if the last question like this, in which plant calyx or in which fruit calyx remain persistent? So chili and brinjal. So in which plants or in which fruit style and stigma, stamen, style and stigma persistent? Punica granatum. All right, Punica granatum. Okay, done. And what type of changes, remaining changes? Ovary develops into fruits. Ovary develops into fruits. Then ovary wall develops into fruit wall or pericarp. Fruit wall or pericarp. Then ovules develops into seeds. Am I right? And integuments develops into seed pods. Integuments. Already I told you, integuments develops into seed coats. What type of seed coats? Outer integument into testa. Inner integument into tegma. Inner integument into tegma. Right. Then come to micropyle again. So that micropyle develops into seed pore. Seed pore. Then hilum. So that hilum develops into seed scab. Then funicle. So that funicle develops into seed stalk. So funicle develops into seed stalk. Right. So these are the post-fertilization changes. So after fertilization, what type of changes we observe? So calyx, corolla, androecium, style, and stigma wither away or fall off. But in some plants, calyx remain persistent. Example, chili and brinjal. In some plants, corolla, androecium, style, and stigma also persistent. Example, punica granatum. And ovary develops into fruit. Ovary wall develops into pericarp or fruit wall. And ovules develops into seeds, integuments, outer integument into testa, inner integument into tegmen, micropyle develops into seed pore, hilum develops into seed scale, and funicle develops into seed stalk, otherwise stalk of the same. So these are the changes we observed after fertilization or post-fertilization changes these. Then last one, parthenocarpy. What is parthenocarpy? So, or parthenogenesis. Parthenogenesis. Last side heading in this chapter, parthenogenesis. So better to take parthenogenesis. So this parthenogenesis concept was first explained by the Charles Bonnet. Charles Bonnet in aphids. In aphids. So where exactly? In aphids. Okay, what is parthenogenesis? So, say development of new individual from the female gamete only female gamete, right? So it means female gametes or egg, female gamete or egg directly develops into new individual. Directly develops into new individual or new organism. New individual or new organism called parthenogenesis. Here, no need of male gamete for this process. No need of male gametes. So male gamete for this process. So it means without fertilization, without fusion of male gamete, without zygote formation, so directly that female gamete or egg develops into new individual called parthenogenesis. It is also called as uniparental sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction requires two opposite parents, male parent and female parent. But here we consider it as uniparental sexual reproduction. Uniparental sexual reproduction. So now tell me, is it sexual reproduction or asexual reproduction? Completely asexual reproduction. Completely asexual reproduction only. Why? Because only one parent is involved. And that is same type of genetic material passing from one generation to another generation, right? So it is completely asexual reproduction. But we call it as uniparental sexual reproduction. It mimics like sexual reproduction, right? So example, honeybees. Honeybees, rotifers, and turkey birds, then lizards also, lizards. So lizards, turkey birds, rotifers, honeybees, example for parthenogenesis. So parthenogenesis is also called as uniparental sexual reproduction. It mimics like sexual reproduction but completely asexual reproduction. This concept was explained by the Charles Bonnet in aphids. So actual definition for parthenogenesis. So female gamete or egg cells directly develops into new individuals without involvement of male gamete, without fertilization, without zygote formation. Right? Called parthenogenesis. So note it down. So remaining information related to sexual reproduction in flowering plants. Sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So what type of events are there in sexual reproduction of flowering plants? So what are pre-fertilization events? What are fertilization events? What are post-fertilization events in angiospermic plants? In detail, we'll see one by one again. So what is the actual structure of flower? All right. So what type of gametogenesis takes place? How male gametes and female gametes are developed in the plants? So that information we'll see in detail in next classes or further classes. Okay. So note it down. So totally reproduction in organisms chapter over. So next chapter, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So that chapter in detail we'll see in further classes. All right.